Let's now invite our guests who will participate at the following panel: Artificial Intelligence, Digital Safety. We have Lais from Association of New Schools to be our mediator and to represent our Education Secretary of the State of São Paulo. I would like to invite Professor Costa, who is Director of the Center of Technology and Secretary of Education of the State of São Paulo. Corporate Citizenship from IBM, Juliana Nobre. CERT.br Manager, Christine Hoppers. And teacher from the Municipality Network of Schools, Débora Garofalo.
Eu passo a palavra para a Laís, nossa mediadora.
Good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here to talk about safe internet. We believe that schools are the proper setting to promote digital inclusion, digital safety, and for that purpose we need to prepare our teachers so they can feel at ease to be able to address that topic to their students. And to address this relevant topic, I will hand over to Liliane. Liliane, she's here representing public policies. I am Liliane. I am here on behalf of the Secretary of Education. I apologize for him not making here today. I teach at the Public Education Network, and right now I am director of our center. Our secretary has been developing a number of actions to reach our students, and how will the public base support this ongoing endeavor? For quite many years, actually, we have five coordinators and one school for some presential studies and some e-learning. One of those was the Safe Internet. Safe Internet course became a mandatory module as part of our workshops. In addition, to learn more about that environment, teachers would go through that module, which would teach them things that maybe back in the year 2010, 11, today that sounds so obvious, but that was not the case in the past. Like how to prepare an email, to have a safe password, to log out. Sometimes we leave our Gmail or Yahoo open. You do not exit, you just close it, you leave it open, and anyone can access your account. Some simple hints as how can we navigate safely, how can we find safe websites, and to offer safe sites to our students to navigate. That was the first contact we had with teachers when technology becomes a reality. We have a program which is school access, as they are shaped like computer classes where students they have broader access to technologies, to the internet. So do teachers who would need a certain background for people to use internet safer. After that, and more recently, thanks to a partnership with FacerNet and Google, we had offered another course with 6,500 teachers, and 5,000 of them concluded it. That course is offered repeatedly until we realize that it has to be reshaped. Once we realize that the ongoing technology is no longer the same, it had become obsolete. different from the previous course that was more like Web 1.0. Today, technology advances at schools, and students and teachers, they are constant technology users. But sometimes we do not know how to make that bridge in the classroom. And now this course that was released last year and offered was so important, as that became a new highlight about this critical, ethical, collaborative way of working in the web. It's very likely that this course will be once again offered this year. In Portuguese, as a syllabus, digital culture is emphasized at all grades, and that will still be perceived in the college level, where on high school level rather, and some issues such as collaboration ethics that becomes a classroom content integrated to your curriculum. So we have to, that is part, as part of our syllabus, language practice within and outside classrooms, and how do we use and submit a file, a document, how to produce content within the digital environment, how do we distribute that safely, what are the ethical principles to be kept within digital environment. Since the very beginning, we have to make clear that we are traceable in the web, and how does that happen. And in the Portuguese syllabus, that goes towards use of languages, where we'll talk about reading as in the past. I am a Portuguese teacher, for instance. We are going to talk about verbal, non-verbal, and the multi-semiosis available in the web, and some other readings which are possible, as well as writing productions able in the internet. Thinking about digital culture, how can we do that in a joint manner, critical way, ethical? How can we search for information at safe websites? How can I share information? How can I detect a fake news? All of that is a content to be dealt in the classrooms, exactly as we taught subject, verb, and complement. Now we will have more content towards digital culture that will be easily taken to a student who is a frequent user, but someone who not always has ethical or critical awareness. As part of this environment, what is acceptable, what is not, how do we approach bullying, which is a frequent matter at both private and public schools. How are people attacked in the web? Children and youngsters, they suffer lots of bullying in the virtual environment. How can we defend ourselves from that? A syllabus from São Paulo is the one which will emphasize a more critical use with awareness, and students that will need to reflect about the use of internet. That's not just an internet for fun, to play, but an internet which allows you to produce information, content, and at what extent are we responsible for what we produce, and for what and for that we make available at WhatsApp, Facebook, what is our availability in such an environment where we believe no one will ever find us. In the access room, we have some safe measures considering sites that they may or may not access, especially because we always work with kids and adolescents, teenagers. In addition to physical security, of not surfing the web, we also consider how to collaborate, allowing a syllabus which is aligned to digital culture, allowing students to be main players of their future.
Dentro da internet também.
Whatever happens within the internet will affect their personal lives. And bullying is a clear example of what happens in the network will affect their personal lives. And that is linked to a number of future traumas. A organized public policy has to consider a syllabus which includes technology as part of its principles. Thank you, Liliane.
Eu queria agora passar a palavra para a Juliana.
Next, I will hand to Juliana. I'm here representing cooperative citizenship at IBM and the importance of including technology as part of syllabus in the public schools in the state of São Paulo. More we learn about technology, more we understand that it changes fast. And our role here is to follow that closely. And today, we keep hearing about fourth industrial revolution, which is impacting deeply our society. All new digital solutions or technologies, they represent a new transforming cycle in the society. And we have to follow that transformation. And the process throughout which we are going through is no longer different from what used to be internet in the past. Exposed to just a few, highly connected to academic settings, and today is finally accessible to all. But it has to be inserted and presented to be used widely by everyone. And this is exactly the pathway to be followed by artificial intelligence. And but with a different speed, a velocity which we have to face, which we have to pursue in face of new technologies. And there is no other way to follow. We have to acknowledge, to be close, to understand, to be able to criticize, to learn about challenges, and also to embrace opportunities. This double understanding about new technologies and how to work challenges that has to be present in any new technology presented to us. And IBM, 1 year ago, reflected upon that. What are the possibilities of artificial intelligence on behalf of education? Talking to some private schools, coordinators, directors, and faculties, they got together to discuss about this new methodology, which is a different way of thinking outside the box, introducing opportunities, challenges, and among opportunities, we have to point out the possibility to have a more customized teaching. Once we understand that we can have a teaching process which will reach each one of the students. Interdisciplinary work somehow can expand and push up that this new way of seeing an interdisciplinary approach. And knowledge expansion. Once we say that computer systems, they can enhance cognitive humans' abilities to solve problems, how can then we human beings understand it as an extension of our knowledge and somehow to benefit from it? There are some applied cases in the health sector or in the lawyer and or at law firms that can be supported by that machine. Machines, they just help humans' decision-making process. As part of challenges, the strongest one relies on privacy. And as society, we are slowly advancing data protection. It represents a step ahead in Brazil as well as in Europe. When we talk about artificial intelligence, yes, we have to consider privacy to that app and to question if a photo app does that really need all my personal information. We have to have a more critical understanding. With that we can increase our level of education. Conversely, as part of challenges, there is a concern about expansion of that gap, the split between those who have it versus those who haven't got it. All roles will be impacted by technology, by artificial intelligence. Well, not quite. Not everyone will become developers, but at least they will have to be able to talk, to understand what are the possibilities, and this relationship will be realmente pure and genuine. Like a taxi driver now benefits from different apps. And there is a new, this is another example, and work together with schools where we can see in a society which is highly impacted by technology. That is essential. With that, we can avoid and not let any young behind, allowing them to keep on producing, following trends, and so on. And an additional point was raised by teachers who said that how can teachers have access to it? We cannot demand that to get to the end of the schools without allowing teachers to go through that process and to reflect about their impact and the use of technology, the use of cell phones in the schools, in the classroom. I mean, as a society, we are going through transformation. Therefore, we have to take a good look at the base, at the framework that are being constructed. And all sectors, they have to make their take and to find their position as technology afterwards will reflect what's taken place at the ends, considering principles, goals of this type of technology, and reinforcing the need of an ethical, transparent agenda with principles that are real rights and not just technology. That is very much important. Thank you. Thank you.
Agora, olha, alguém ganhou 2 minutinhos.
Well, someone got 2 minutes. Now we are going to call Christine to talk about the topic. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I do not deal directly with education. As a CERT manager, I see the problems that take place, incidents, complaints. And since the beginning of our work, we had huge demand in this regard. If you see the problem, why can't you create materials to help us prevent from risks? And this is very interesting. About 6, 7 years ago, we started to see a huge demand for materials to teachers. Teachers that would take part in events, they saw our event, our guides, and they wanted to use it in the classrooms. And then we started to have different fascicles. We say are the homeopathic doses, one talking about privacy, one talking about passwords, specifics. And together, we started to develop slides to be used in training. Again, because of the demand, whenever there was a lecture. And we said, there are so many people using the material for class, why can't we make it easier for people to use it? And then, little by little, again, the demand started with people that were more senior, more adults, and then teachers from elementary schools. And why is that? Because children have their cell phones. Everything that we're talking about in the morning is part of the world of children. And we have material for children. We had just to focus on what? And the focus was on bullying and ethics, which I think is something that we have to have. But there is something else. There are other risks on the web. Cell phones that can start filming children, recording information about them. So we have to remember that children are the IT consultants of their parents' house. Home. And the end of Alexandre's talk, he mentioned that he wanted to discuss a piece of data that was very interesting. And to me, since the first six kids came to surface, how parents think their children are safe on the web. And in the first study, it was completely the opposite. 70% of children said there were risks on the web, and 70% of parents thinking that everything was okay. And then you think, well, but do children know how to protect themselves? Because there are many things that we as adults have to teach them. And then I will approach a topic that is critical thinking. And you mentioned about that. And it is a bit worrisome to get to society today in which we outsourced critical thinking. You have to have an agency to say if it's fake news or not. That is, I have a population that does not have critical thinking. It cannot assess by themselves what it is. And then we go back to the challenge of education itself. I don't think that we have a recipe, but how do you get children and adults and educate them? Because some people say, well, there are lots of people that have a college degree and pass on fake news. It's true, but when we talk to people, they think social media is just like a newspaper. They think that they have a curatorship. And that's not it. So we need different levels of education for different targets. Some people say, oh, it was on Facebook, as if they were saying it was on the news. Facebook has a different dynamics. On the other hand, you have children that do not want to watch TV. They can't stand commercials. They want to go straight for the information. And we have to stop and think, how do we deal with all that? And one of the things that we see in terms of return is that younger people are still very naive. They understand technology, but when it comes down to it, the fact they can play a game or use the cell phone does not mean that they understand what is behind the web. And I think this is a gap to try understand. Today we have artificial intelligence, so we are perfect. No, we are not. People would have to understand a bit of math, a bit of logics, to understand these are probable algorithms that can bring you an answer. And on the other side, some people sometimes are disgusted about algorithms, but algorithms translate to training. And we have seen algorithms that follow Twitter, and they become a bit violent, probably because they were following a discussion. So it's not the algorithm per se. There are people that are using and so I think this is a point that little by little we have to address. Ideally, in the future, as I have seen in some countries, in their curriculum they have to have 2 foreign languages, but one of the foreign languages is programming, which makes sense. When you are programming a computer, you are learning a language. It is called programming language. You are learning new syntax, you are learning semantics, and you have to dialogue with something that is a machine. The first time I saw it, I found it strange, but it's quite interesting. But that depends on the teaching of logics, mathematics. Again, we go back to the point that basic education, when it is good, is essential for us to have a whole generation that will interact to technology better. They will have to interact to technology, but they cannot be naive about that. And I think this is the most important thing. We're always going to have marketing, criminals trying to do something bad. And if we can all build a better internet, one of the things that we have been trying to invest on is the following. You have to see the risks that we come across. Most of attacks are just simple felonies that are difficult to detect because everything is very similar to legitimate messages, and they use the vulnerability of systems to be able to get to your cell phone. So they are more refined attacks, but it's basically a person that wants to extort or rob you. Or sometimes it's someone that has some work to deliver at school and they got something on the web and they don't know how to decipher that. So these are challenges. Children have to be aware of things because when an antivirus program says there is an attack, they have to know that this is bad. When there is an alert that a site has a problem, it's not that we want to cheat them, but there is a real problem. And we can feel from the interactions we have had with teachers is that teachers themselves do not understand the technology. So initiatives as this one of the Department of Education, we were part of the first wave of training. I mean, teachers have to be more comfortable with technology for them to understand that the problem is not the technology per se, but rather the capacity we have to evolve with technology, because technology will change. So we have something that is very complex, different areas, and we have to have more dialogues. We have been trying to make this material available, but we have a challenge, how to get to private schools, public schools, in states where we are not present, to make things easier for us to spread the message. And then we are going to know where we want to get in 15, 20 years' time. It would be good if people were more savvy in terms of technology, even if they are not going to work with it, but to be more critical, to accept messages and products. Okay, thank you very much, Christine. Now, Débora. Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you, especially because I am a teacher in the public system. I hope we can increasingly be in these areas where we can establish dialogues. I'm going to talk a bit about how digital citizenship and digital culture are inserted in schools. It's important to say that we don't have a technology that is fully contextualized for the school reality. The world is moving on to the 4.0 industry. But schools still use blackboards and chalks. We still use 1.0 concepts of education. But we are moving on to the 4.0 world with artificial intelligence, with programming, and etc. So, as a teacher of technology, one of my main concerns every start of a new year is digital citizenship, to have the concept discussed with my students. Why is that? Because I wasn't born in the digital era, but my students were. They are consumers of technology. And we want them not only to be consumers, but rather also producers. And to be producers of quality content, they have to understand it. So let's talk about digital citizenship and culture in the classroom. Technologies are going to offer a possibility of a more democratic access. It's the cyberspace. In the past, we didn't have access to knowledge, but our students do. I was talking to my students when I had to, I don't know, conduct any kind of research. I had to go to a library. We all did. Today, the information is at the tip of our fingers. So, to think about that is important for them to understand that they have this access, especially to youngsters. Inside the classroom, we cannot say that you should not use the cell phone. I think the cell phone can be a teaching tool. It should not be left outside the classroom. But they have to understand how to use it so that they are able of using it with ethics and with reflection as established by the BNCC. And the BNCC was very important to us because it established technology as a teaching tool that has to be worked with, that has to be conceptualized. So the school should bring the concepts of digital citizenship, cyber activism, and assistive technology coming from the interaction with the internet and social media. There is no denial. This is the world. Today, our students can establish a dialogue, but we still have a gap, a bridge to be established because they don't have full awareness of what it is. So the school has to rethink of its role to establish this bridge and make it work. Juliana mentioned about one of the problems that I think everybody agrees, which is cyberbullying. It's very common to talk to students today and hear one of them saying that they either suffered or engaged into cyberbullying based on a real or non-real situation. But one of the most serious problems were that of girls setting dates with people they didn't know and really being scammed because they were naive, because they thought everything that is online is true, people are real. So, raising these points in the classroom, I think, is essential. And how does it work then? Digital citizenship in the classroom. First, you have to reflect the role of the school and our students. Many are not only consumers already, they are producers because they make available the content that they have, a YouTube video, and sometimes they don't have any criterion either, that they are posting something that will stay. A PowerPoint presentation, games. So it's important to approach critical thinking, talk about digital citizenship, because by then we are going to be preparing students to deal with the digital world, which is new to us, but it's not to them, although they don't reflect much on it. And then we have what we call active methodology or probably solving, having pathways to work in the classroom, talk about passwords, privacy, authors' rights, protection, and reliable sources. We have to prepare the kids for this new world. And how do we start? Well, I love guides and primers. I really love them. I work with CERT's guide. I like to work with it. I like to start the year working with it because it's a very playful material and children can understand it. There are some videos that are very nice for you to work with. As the video shows, children say, "My God, I do that. I shouldn't do that." They put themselves in the right shoes. So I think teachers have, as teachers, to approach the topic. But we have to be open. We have to raise and foster dialogue in education, build actions of belonging. I say that a school is not an island. We need partnerships. That's why, as a public teacher, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to you and tell you a bit about the work I am developing. This picture is the picture of the public prosecutor's office talking to children. And why is that? Because I had cases of girls being harassed and cyberbullying. And we have here Dr. Ana Paula. She is a state attorney of the Women's Center, and she started to talk to the kids. And she brought several examples that I, as a teacher, was not aware of, but she had the know-how to open the world to these kids. So again, these bridges are very important to establish an integration between the school and the community and to have concrete actions in the classroom. And what's the result of all the work developed? And it is a work on the day-to-day. It is something that starts every beginning of year, but that does not finish by the end of the year. This is important that we always reinforce. It's like raising a child. You have to keep on doing the right work. But now youngsters understand the importance about talking about the subject, and they are aware that discriminating diversity is wrong. It was the first step for them to have a critical view about their everyday attitudes. And with that, we were able to have changes in schools. And what's the relationship between all this and BNCC? BNCC talks about discursive or speech skills and competencies. I also teach Portuguese. I think that language is very important for a social function. And so mobilizing people, making people aware, and also revisiting postures and reflexive use of the internet. I would like to close saying that citizenship should be understood as the way we have our role as citizens, now, not only offline, but also online. Thank you. Now we are going to open for questions. We are going to gather a bunch of questions, and then we are going to have our panelists comment. The first is about the difficulties of schools. I think today there is still a culture that has to be broken in terms of technological barriers, because many teachers think, how am I going to work with a safe internet if computers at my school do not work or they don't have access to the internet? So how can I take the discussion offline? What kind of actions I can have in this sense? And for the whole thing not be just the responsibility of an IT teacher or a language teacher. And my second question, how can we recover this generation that's already left school and has to have this awareness raised in terms of digital? And how can society support the school for teachers not to be solely responsible to prepare a whole generation with technology? So, who would like to start? I think, as a public teacher, I also am affected by a lack of infrastructure and connectivity. We have to have better public policies. Technology has to become a teaching competency. But we have things already. We have kids that are connected in the classroom with their smartphones. So I think that we have to use what we have and talk to them, establish dialogues with what we have. And new methodologies. Hybrid education today approaches very well this working on and offline, and we can carry out actions of belonging with that. I think we have to open the doors of schools. Schools cannot be closed. We have to establish partnerships to carry out concrete actions. And by means of active methodologies, kids have to be brought to the center of the teaching process. They can no longer be outside. They can no longer be passive. They have to be active players in the center of their learning. Dialogue, I think, is of utmost importance. Technology is not going to replace dialogue. Teachers have to understand robotics, programming. It's a new skill, a new capacity that has to be learned. New trends generate collaboration, empathy, critical thinking. It's all good. But we cannot let dialogue alone. And what kind of dialogue? Dialogue that can lead to actions of belonging. Thank you, Deborah. Before going to the next one, I brought two questions from the web, and I'm going to just cast them at you. The first is, management of public and private schools still is disregarding the internet. How can we boost that? And another question directed to Christine in terms of critical thinking. Do you think programming language should be part of elementary and high school? Well, I'm going to get back to Deborah, but she was talking about offline work. And I think it's very interesting. For you to develop critical thinking, you have to have not technology, but you have to have dynamics. We have a very interesting experience with a different kind of training. The training that we have are for safety professionals. And in general, we have someone that is trained in computation, that has some kind of specialization, and is dealing with something very specific, like incidents in an organization. Everything that you know in terms of critical thinking. And most students come to our course, that is a one-week course. We have 2 one-week courses. And the first thing they are shocked is that we say, there is no computer. And they say, how come? And they are a bit surprised. And why? Because all dynamics are made for them to think. And there are some exercises in which we simulate a computer with paper commands, super low tech. And sometimes we say, so what would you do? And they say, I don't know, I don't have a keyboard. Well, you have to think, what would you do?
And this is exactly what we do not need it. The idea of teaching technology and teaching reasoning, especially reasoning in programming, new stuff, that is related to mathematics, but it comes before anything else. That is key to evaluate a text, to read something critically, and to understand and deal with things. And sometimes you do not expect to have that so early, but reasoning is so playful. When kids they discuss with their peers, with their friends, they start learning and understanding things. But a critical thinking relies on paying attention, observing, and have a dialogue.
E na sessão final, a maioria.
And most would say, well, we were just great. We are doing so right. We stop, we reflect, we talk, we discuss, we think over, and sharing different perspectives that made a huge difference. So the low tech aspect of it is also important. And when I talk about program developers, I do not mean that when you conclude the school, you will be able to develop an app. Well, that's not quite the case, and you can teach that without any computer language support. As a educator, we do not want that our boy or girl will live thinking about that code or being able to write that code, but rather to develop that logic thinking. And that will not start with the computer, but unplugged rather. That is, you will prepare some activities in an offline mode for that kid. Let me give you a very clear example to illustrate. Whenever I started teaching a computer program to my kids, I say that I am a robot and they have to follow me in the classroom. I mean, they have to tell me which step to take next. With that, you develop that critical scientific thinking, which is part of logics. And technology is a support, is a step. It's a learning step to help us to reach to help our students to reach their required competence. In our secretary, we are developing a plan in a short, middle to long run with innovation and technology policies that requires infrastructure, as it is useless talking about infrastructure with no computer or no internet. So we are considering a policy that will take to school infrastructure, information, content, and a vision about what technology is according to each school. What is the role of technology as part of that school unit? How can I apply and make use of technology? And by that, we mean everything: television, radio, video, computers, tablet. There are several technologies in the school, and how can all of them together enhance to students' learning? So we are putting together a document which will guide management and future steps, and how to guide the newcomers. What is our guidance for educational technology use as part of an education network? What do we have to make available in terms of content to ensure learning, because that will be set for Portuguese as a language. To what purpose? To learn what? What is, or what are students learning from that syllabus? Sometimes the teachers, they believe they have to stop their sequence to work with technology. No, that's not quite. Our effort is to consider a technology associated to the syllabus without leaving that feeling that we are removing content. No, on the contrary, we have to guarantee minimal learning, including new skills, competences, abilities that students already use or will use formally in their work, in their future jobs, or to work jointly to those who are technology developers. Sometimes we do not even know what we are after. I mean, I want a school game, but how to request it, how to say what I need, how to submit that request to a web designer. A web designer may develop something awesome, but which is not useful to that setting from a user perspective. So any product, once is released, it has to include users. But anytime we release a product to schools, we end up forgetting that students, they are skilled, but they need some previous learning or previous content that will be useful to them. So a solid trajectory, starting solid trajectory, is a requirement for that student to build up their own way, including or excluding technology. In our PCNs, we have writing, reading, written reading. I mean, that is a commitment to all areas, okay? And that became a commitment to civil society. How can we implement the technology at schools? What sort of contents? Some disciplines, they have a wonderful content, but not always, not all of them. So it's not technology by the sake of technology, but how can technology be embedded? That's not a very simple task. It takes time, it requires effort and time, so we can offer something which makes sense to the network and learn listening to them. We have to hear what they have to say, how effective that technology or that device represents in the learning journey. So we try to take the best of both scenarios and take whatever we can do to our schools, to our teachers and students mainly. It was quite clear to all of us that new skill is learning by learning. And that can be taught since the first childhood to maternity. We have to be open to that. And by tech options, that is part of a journey, and that's exactly how we have to see it, as it happens little by little, and we have to respect each age range, each education or scholar year, and that will be continuous throughout people's lives, formally or informally and formally, especially after elementary education is concluded. And to be able to understand each one of these age ranges, and to understand that high school can have a higher load of technology, which is not the fact when students are still in elementary or middle school. In high school, that is a different journey which allows a more specific and challenging requirements, especially in high school, where new abilities are addressed to digital world. I hope, well, surveys and all this research starts by next week. I hope I can come back next year with some relevant outcomes. Well, thank you so much to all participants.